today's World Insight with Tian Wei, Chinese soldiers join Russia's massive Vostok 2018 war games. What message does this military drill send to the world? And on tonight's episode of Game Changers, provoking and creating, Chinese contemporary artist Xu Bing digs out thoughts and methods for us.
Book from skies, no one can read it, even myself.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. We begin today's program in East Russia, where the armies and air forces of Russia and China mobilized across the training range. Vostok 2018 is not only Russia's largest war game since 1981, but also China's largest overseas drill since the Army's reform. Before our discussion on the military cooperation between China and Russia, take a look at this.
Final drill of Vostok 2018 kicks off at the Tugo training range in East Russia. The drill simulates an anti-invasion campaign. In its first stage, Russian armored vehicles and tanks start mechanized defense along with their Chinese counterparts.
Right behind me is China's Engineer Combat Battalion, which is building a floating bridge across this 161 meters wide river to allow China's company of infantry vehicles and tanks to pass the river within 30 minutes.
As the troops cross the river to pursue an attack, bomb shells rain on the makeshift enemy, and fighter bombers and helicopters also throw bombs and fire shells from the air.
In previous China-Russia drills, we and the Russian Air Forces carried out separate attack missions. But this time, we operated together in a unified formation.
In the final phase, the two nations' forces attack and push the enemy across the border. After observing the drills by helicopter, Russian President Vladimir Putin watches the joint military parade held by the two armies. Chinese Defense Minister Wei Fenghe also attends. During the military parade, the Russian army rolled out many of its latest and mightiest battle weaponry, including the G-90 tanks, Su-34 and Su-35 fighter jets. For China, the PLA displayed some of its latest equipment, like the Type 99 main battle tank, WZ-9 and WZ-19 attack helicopters.
For more discussion on Russia's Vostok 2018 exercises and China-Russia military ties, we are joined in our Beijing studio, Zhu Chenghu, Chinese military expert retired from Defense Airs Institute, the PLA National Defense University. Let's take a look at some of our panelists. Also joining us in Moscow, we have Pavel Felgenhauer, Russian defense analyst. In Arlington, the United States, we have Ambassador William Courtney, adjunct senior fellow at the RAND Cooperation. General Zhu, if you are looking at the camera, where our audience will be able to see you there. Thank you so much. Let me begin by asking you, Mr. Pavel Felgenhauer, coming from Russia, exactly what is the message, do you think, this large-scale military exercise by Russia, joined by China, is sending to the rest of the world? Briefly from you, sir.
Well, it was as Russian President Vladimir Putin said today, observing the climax of the exercises and the joint military parade of Russian, Chinese, and Mongolian soldiers, that Russia is a peace-loving nation, but it's ready to defend its national interests and those of its allies. So Russia has demonstrated with these massive war games that it has restored the capability to mobilize, move long distance, deploy in the field, and maintain in the field large numbers of troops and weapons to fight a major possible war.
All right, General Zhu, coming from China, we see this joint military exercise is about the Siberia area. It is about the Far East. It is also about the Arctic Circle as well as the Pacific Ocean. Very comprehensive, huge areas being covered. obviously the troops having the capability of all moving to the Far East and make things happen. General Zhu, what exactly is it about?
I believe that this exercise demonstrates the capabilities of Russia, not only in the nuclear field but also in the conventional field. And secondly, I believe that during the war in Syria, the Russian military learned a lot of experience as well as lessons. And this is actually to further test the capabilities of large-scale warfare in the future. And thirdly, I believe that the joint exercises which involve some of Chinese troops is actually a token of the deep-going cooperation between China and Russia in the military field.
We are watching some of the footages coming from those joint exercises between China and the Russian side. Mr. Courtney, listening to your colleagues coming from Moscow and Beijing, obviously there are certain messages being received in Washington. What exactly are they, though?
Well, a couple of aspects of this exercise are interesting. One is that 99% of the troops and 97% of the equipment is Russian. Only 1% of the personnel and 3% of the equipment is Chinese. That's quite lopsided. NATO has never had an exercise that is so lopsided. When NATO has joint exercises, participation from other countries is substantially greater. So to some extent, this exercise underlines that Russia and China don't really have a military alliance. China has enough participation to learn more about how Russian military operates, but it's not truly an alliance. And second, this is the largest exercise since Zapad 1981. I was in Moscow at the time of that exercise. It was intended to intimidate and coerce Poland, the Polish authorities, to clamp down on the Solidarity Free Trade Union movement. The Solidarity Free Trade Union movement 3 months later was in fact reduced to impotence temporarily because martial law was declared by the Polish authorities.
Well,
this exercise is the largest since that exercise, but it's unclear what is the geopolitical purpose.
Well, if you're unclear about that, maybe Mr. Felgenhauer could explain clearer about that. And 1981 is hardly, one has to admit, any comparison to 2018. Mr. Felgenhauer, what exactly is the purpose? That exactly is the question Mr. Courtney asked. He apparently did not understand. Mr. Felgenhauer, you want to further explain?
Well, these are not really exercises per se. These are war games. Exercises happen lots of times each year. War games, the previous ones was in in 81 at the height of the Cold War. War games is when two groups of armies are formed and they kind of fight each other on ground, air and sea, and that's what was happening. It was the culmination of the Russian rebuilding of forces and capabilities that began in earnest in 13, and now this has been demonstrated and also tested that we can do it, that Russia can mobilize large forces for a regional war if need be to defend its national interest in the Far East or in Europe. In the Far East, such big exercises are easier to hold because in Europe there's the Vienna document of the OEC which limits military maneuvers. In the Far East, legally it's much more easier to do. And that's what the Russian General Staff and the Defense Ministry have shown the world, and of course the Kremlin, that they can do it.
Okay, General Zhu from China, what does China see in the capabilities that Russia has been demonstrating in the past year? There are, of course, military actions taken by Russia in Syria recently. Meanwhile, this by air, on the sea, on the land war game in which China certainly is part of it has also shown Russia's military capability, pragmatic military capabilities. General Zhu.
Yeah. To be very frank, the military actions of Russian military in Syria is quite limited in size, but this exercise is very large in size. It demonstrates the capability of the force projection. This is very important for Russia, which is the largest country in the territory. Secondly, I believe that it demonstrates that the tradition of organizing and conducting large-scale ground, air, and naval operations is still there. And thirdly, it demonstrates that it will continue to be capable in the future in case it is attacked or invaded.
If we want to take a look at some of the numbers related to this joint exercise, or rather war game, the headline figures for Russia's Vostok military exercises are dramatic. 300,000 soldiers, 36,000 tanks and other vehicles, 80 ships, 1,000 aircraft operating across more than half the country, just double the size of the British armed forces. As if that weren't enough, some 3,200 Chinese troops and 30 aircrafts also involved, along with small Mongolian force. You see some of the numbers over there. But General Zhu, earlier, Mr. Courtney, coming from the U.S., observed very sharply that this is a war game, but not a military alliance between China and Russia. Help us to explain what is this delicate balance China and Russia is trying to tap here. On the one hand, pressure coming from outside, you see China and the United States in a trade war, things could go worse than what is already, and therefore China wants to have more maneuvering space when it comes to international cooperation. On the other hand, Russia having pressure coming from Washington as well, at the same time, not necessarily good relations with NATO. So what is this nature of relation that the two sides are trying to test and keep that delicate balance about? General Zhu, briefly from you, and then we go to our Russian guest.
Yeah, first of all, I don't think this exercise is really intended to against the United States. It is because such large-scale exercises needs a long time to organize. I don't think this exercise was put on the table before the launch of the trade warfare between China and the United States.
Yeah.
And this is one. Secondly, I believe that I agree with you that China and Russia are not the relations. I mean, the meal-to-meal relations between these two countries is not a sort of alliance, but it's quite possible for these countries to organize some sort of coalition in case they have common mission and a common threat in the future. This is quite likely.
Interesting. Mr. Falkenhauer, coalition is the possible word that your Chinese counterpart is testing here. What about you?
Well, it has been many times said that Russia and China are not allies, that they are strategic partners, but the world is changing, and the strategic partnership, it's still a strategic partnership, but it's most likely beginning to move in the direction of some kind of an alliance. Russia and China are right now acting and very closely in the political field. Economically, they're also becoming increasingly close. China-Russian trade is booming, and trade with China is strategically important right now for Russia. And now there's direct military cooperation. Before, there were, of course, many times in previous years, Russia-Chinese exercises, but those were anti-terrorist in the framework of the Shanghai Organization. Now it's military. China taking part, though, with the brigade-sized contingent in the big Russian war games, but still that is very important, very significant. Actually, the United States is pressurizing China and Russia together by jointly putting sanctions and tariffs on both sides and having a rather hostile policy towards both countries, which makes them get closer and closer together.
Mr. Courtney, is that what Washington really wants to see? I'm not necessarily talking about President Trump, but rather the elites in the geopolitics strategic designs.
Well, I agree with Mr. Felgenhauer. Russia is isolated from the West more than at any time in its modern history as an independent country. So Russia is trying to reach out to China to have closer relations. Russia and China have a long border. They should naturally have close relations. Russia lies between Europe and China and therefore has a great opportunity to improve economic cooperation and transportation infrastructure between those two large markets. But at the same time, China does not want to get too close to Russia because Russia is kind of toxic with the West, if you will. Russia's military activities are all in the western part, if you will, Syria, eastern Ukraine. That's the focus of Russian military activities. So this exercise is for show, but it doesn't really have a purpose similar to the Zapad 1981 exercise.
General Zhu, from China, you see the Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin has been meeting 3 times already, 3 times since the year begins this time. Also, you know, it is once and again being played a video here in China that the 2 presidents were making their pancakes, if we are not talking about war games. These absolutely are clear signals that both are determined to send to the rest of the world. There are certain kinds of interactions and coordination as well as addressing each other's needs that the 2 are seeing in the necessity of moving forward and creating more space for one another's countries.
Yeah, this is very important. I believe that the frequent meetings between President Xi and President Putin shows that the personal ties between them, and second, that shows that the friendship between China or the ties between China and Russia are becoming closer and closer. And thirdly, it shows that maybe in the future, on a lot of global issues, they will join their hands to handle some of the challenging problems and the challenging situations.
I see. Mr. Felgenhauer, if I could go to you, besides war games, what can China and Russia work on when it comes to military cooperation? Some were talking about technologies, others was talking about high-end technologies coming from Russia, taking the place of those vacuums left by the U.S. reluctance to deal with China when it comes to most advanced technologies. Mr. Felgenhauer, your thought?
Well, there's been a lot of talks between Russia and China on possibly producing jointly weapon systems. There is a lot of room for very good mutual exchanges. Russia has some technologies China does not have. China is producing components and compounds that Russia was previously buying in the United States. Up to $1.5 billion worth of double-use equipment was bought every year by Russia in the United States to make radars, to make missiles, to make different other military things that now the United States is barred, it's under sanctions, and nothing is coming. So Russia is turning to China to buy not just simply to sell commodities and buy consumer goods, but to buy machinery, to buy investment goods. And that trade is booming right now. So yes, there is a lot of room to work together on military and non-military technologies.
I see. Before we go, final words from you, General Zhu from China. You see the potential?
Yes.
Is China reliable still as a peace player in the world as a result? Very briefly, sir.
Yes, I will see the bright future of defense and the military technology cooperation between these two countries. I believe that China will continue to play the role of peacekeeper in the world.
All right. Thank you so much, the three of you gentlemen, for being with us. William Courtney, Feivel Felgenhauer, and Zhu Chenghu. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Stay with us here on World Insight, still to come on the program. On tonight's episode of Game Changers, Provoking and Creating, Chinese contemporary artist Xu Bing digs out thoughts and methods for us. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you Monday to Friday, live on CGTN. On tonight's episode of Game Changers, let's meet Xu Bing, one of the world's most influential Chinese contemporary artists. He's both playful and insightful in his unique way of interacting with language, provoking experiment, and eventually finding an uncharted path to expression. Unlike many of his contemporaries, his work appeals to both the highbrow art circle and the public alike. That is reflected by the crowd that attended his Beijing exhibition, Xu Bing Thought and Method, his most comprehensive retrospective exhibition to date. I visited him recently in his Beijing studio. One could tell he is really enjoying wrestling with ideas and methods.
Actually, I don't know what is contemporary art. Even I'm doing the art. Some people call me the conceptual art, contemporary artist. Actually, I don't think art is that important.
Why not?
Creativity from the society, right? Yes. This is so strong, really powerful, really big, you know. So even artist, even the thinker, very passive.
Have to catch up all the time.
I try to catch up. Art creativity is really, really low.
Why is that?
The artist, we always stuck inside of the circle. The all art language created by the master in that time. Good for them talking that time what they want to say. I only say something no one have been said. Otherwise you don't need to say anything. But if you want to say something really delicate, so you must find a new way.
The new language that you are looking for have been quite impressive. The book from the sky, that is really a new way of speaking your mind. How did you find that language?
Actually, in that time, I really want making my art look like the standard international contemporary art. Yeah, because I really want to get out, jump out from the old art system. I want to make a new art, but actually I don't know what is new art. Finally, I'm making a big installation of a book from sky. But I really surprised. Actually, this piece from inside of outside, even the communicated way to the audience, they all is really Chinese and tradition, Chinese philosophy.
So you wanted to jump out of the Chinese way, but exactly you ended up exactly the Chinese way.
Yeah, actually you cannot escape
who you are.
Who you are, yeah. That time is just after the Cultural Revolutions, the cultural fever, about the 80s.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm as a young teacher in Kafa. I really involved with the discussion about the cultural and reading lots of about the books. Yeah, any book, even I can get it, I read it. But when I involve too much, I feel I lost something.
Why?
I think I'm really clean. I know about it. But when I'm reading too much, I discussion about I confused. So I really want this do something, explain about myself. I really want making a book, talking about how the cultural, how related with the human.
A lot of people in contemporary art these days in China say your piece, A Book from the Sky, woke them up.
Because in that time, right, in that period, the whole China cultural world, we really learn Western culture.
Yes.
The people think, oh, from now we had Chinese contemporary art can
dialogue equally.
Yeah, can dialogue
with whoever
equally
else
with,
in the world.
That piece I did really seriously because I had the idea. When I get idea, so I know I must be really serious making the book, present them as it looks really like important book.
Right.
So each characters I need to design by myself and carving them and hand print out. And the book is a classical thread binding. It's a big size, making people think, oh, that beautiful book must be tell us this, some important information, some important thing.
That's right.
Yeah, but they don't tell you anything. After the piece, I moved to American, yeah, because I still want to know what is contemporary art.
That's not an easy task for someone, you know, who have never been out of China, all of a sudden parachuted into America, has to be an artist, struggle and survive, and even eventually got known.
I don't have a really difficulty, have a really big gap to living there and working there.
Interesting. A lot of people have big problems, you know, challenge. You don't.
We have been past the different kinds of social period, you know, the earlier socialism period, and we went to
Cultural
the countryside.
Revolution.
Yeah.
Eventually, after the Cultural Revolution, reform and opening up. So you went through a lot.
I can join any kind of life. Yeah, doesn't matter.
Xu Bing did stay in America for more than a decade before coming back to China. The reason behind his back and forth is very simple. He wants to be where the energy is. Philip Tenari, the director and CEO of UCC and co-curator of the exhibition, understands that feeling very well. In fact, Philip's connection to Chinese contemporary art started when he first encountered Xu Bing's art. He could not help but expressing his fascination to me about those works.
It's not like, oh, this painting, it's so beautiful, or, oh, this performance, it's so extreme and so radical. No, I mean, every piece, so many ideas, such concentration, such attention to detail and execution. And you start with the very, sort of breakthrough piece in the 80s, the Book from the Sky.
Right.
I mean, can you even imagine what it would be like to think of 4,000 characters on your own? What I really love about his work, though, is it's always so playful. It's not serious. I mean, it's serious in how it's made, but it's playful in kind of what it brings to the viewer. It's very generous.
Wild, precision, and playful.
Yes, all at once.
All at the same time.
Yeah.
And also, like, over there, there's like this artwork where he uses emojis, and I think it's so interesting because, yeah, because we use them every day for when we text each other or like our friends, and then he uses them in his artworks and represent like this whole different language. It's just so interesting.
As his contemporary, I can understand the meaning of Xu Bing's works, which have Chinese roots but are illustrated with a global outlook.
Whether it is the curator or the visitor to his exhibition had a lot to say about what they have seen and learned as a result of Xu Bing's works. Xu Bing is the kind of artist who is constantly thinking and digging. That is true when he was in China in his youth. That was also true when he lived in New York for almost 2 decades. That is still true when he moved back to China simply because he wants to be where the energy is. Not to mention how the technologies are transforming the lives of 1.4 billion people. He seems to have found the real secret, in a way, behind the relationship between vision and meaning in all cultures.
Finally, I really understand. Doesn't matter which country, which society, any culture, any country, they all have a good way and a bad way. Something you really hate it, really bother you. But lately I learned you have to bear with them. You can't touch some things really valuable underneath.
Yes.
Yeah. American culture actually like that. For example, when I graduated from Central Academy, we want to be the great artist. There's a street art and the pop art, that kind of thing. We think, oh, that's a low art. That's a great art. Actually, it's covered by something you doesn't like it. When I'm back to China, Chinese characters is a really special influence to where cultural identity, where cultural personality, and the way we think. People starting off the educated, we are always a copy of the characters.
Yes.
You know, we want to go with the flow. You know, because we're writing is by the second stroke.
Yes.
Always follow the first stroke. You know, third stroke always follow the first and the second stroke.
You moved on from the book from the sky to the book from the ground.
Yeah.
One of those works use a lot of emoji.
Yeah.
So you are trying to dialogue and make use of the tools.
Yeah.
You also created a video called Dragonfly. It is a discussion about technology, privacy. Professor, you tell me about this graduation that you had over the time.
I don't care about the art themselves.
Yes.
I think the art themselves, the style. The artist must be a good thinker. That's really important, of course. Then you have you face to your time. You must have something you want to say. You need to say something really right way, really delicate, really sensitive. You must find the right way to speak out. Those two work, book from sky with a book from the ground, really different, but some ways they are same. Why I say that? Because those two books treat everybody equally. Doesn't matter you are educated, how high, are you a professor, are you what?
I like that.
Yeah, doesn't matter you come from which cultural background. Doesn't matter. Book from sky, no one can read it, even myself. But the book from the ground, everybody can read it. Doesn't matter your educated level.
It doesn't matter, really. Xu Bing, an artist with a constantly curious mind, finally made his latest work, Dragonfly Eyes, after researching and experimenting for 5 years. At the very beginning, he saw some security camera recordings on TV, and he was immediately hooked. The end result is 10,000 hours of publicly available surveillance videos collected by the artist and his team, condensed into an 81-minute-long film that follows the plot of an apparent love story. It was then that Xu Bing knew that he was right in moving back to China, and also he found his latest toy.
I live in New York a long time, right?
Yes.
Then one beginning, I always go to museum, go to galleries, walk around the Chelsea, looking for about the contemporary art. Yeah. By long time, I feel the museum, the art, galleries, the art, and does give me the
inspiration.
Inspiration, yeah. They don't give me the new thinking energy. That time I feel that China is a new country. They have lots of energy. They have lots of new layer of the cultural. They are really international, really international, and so many space and so many questions. Experimental artists really need it.
Yes.
You must be living here and working there, because the society is always give you a new thinking energy.
Absolutely exciting society. You have to always woken up in order to grasp.
You're right. You're right.
But that is a hard thing, because once you are in this society, you go with the rhythm.
Yeah.
Sometimes you forget that you are here to observe.
Yeah.
You also went to sleep together with the others as well.
Yeah. Even I'm doing the contemporary art, I always rethinking about this, the problem of the contemporary art system. For example, some people ask me, "Oh, Xubing, you come back, you must be bring some new cultural and the contemporary art came to China, But actually, I know in here
there's much more.
Much more. It's really, really avant-garde, really contemporary. The whole society is really contemporary. I must be like why 20 years ago I went to New York. Then I must be learn something here. I must be changing my the whole body, Then I can living here and do something here.
You like now who you are than what you used to be?
I like, yes, of course.
And then there's also the Dragonfly.
CCTV, the
video.
Image. Yeah. But my idea look like a words. They have a meaning, but them is over there like inside of the dictionary. They don't have a story. They don't have meaning. Yeah. But it's if you look like you are writing, you put in them here or here or here. Finally, you give a really elegant meaning. This idea is actually I start from the 2013. One day I saw this, from the TV, surveillance camera image. Oh, I feel it really interesting. I feel it so touched to me. Yeah, I think because they are really real and make you nervous. They don't happen anything.
Yes.
But you're always thinking, waiting, something must be happen. Yeah. So I had ideas. I say, if someone only use the surveillance image, making a movie, must be making a long fiction movie. Must be really great. Before we thought of the fiction movie, it's fake. But Dragonfly Eyes, any moment, any minute, real happened. This is so interesting.
Yes.
And I think, this way is I can make a movie without the cameraman, without the actors. I'm a contemporary artist. I'm a conceptual artist.
Yes.
So I always want to push the conceptual idea go to the end. Actually, that time we couldn't get enough footage until 2015, beginning of 2015. I found on the internet already have a really rich, lots of really different kinds of surveillance image putting online. So we buy the 20 computers and recited we are studio. Then we download.
How many documents have you signed as a result?
We get it about over 90% people. We get the permission from them. Through this movie, some people asking, the movie talking what? Talking about the love story or talking something else? Totally not. I always seriously tell something to you, but actually I real thing I want to tell you something else.
Xu Bing has been courted by prestigious museums around the world. His work has also been shown at Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, British Museum in London, among many others. And also institutions outside and inside China have also recognized him and his status in contemporary art. However, according to many, fundamentally, he is still a real artist. Is he typical of his generation?
I think he's exceptional. The other thing is, he never really got that excited about, and he doesn't really care about the art market, he doesn't court success or try for it explicitly. It sort of comes because the work is so good, but, I think he's someone who's just so deeply committed to his work and to what he's doing.
And that seems to be the conclusion we also have about Xu Bing. And with that, we are coming to an end our visit to Xu Bing's exhibition at UCCA and our talk with Xu Bing about thoughts and methods he provokes and creates. We see in his work an interesting world in which we are definitely part of it. In our series Game Changers, we will look at pioneers who epitomized the spirit of China's 40 years of reform and opening up. And this time we featured Xu Bing. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Inside CGTN into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Inside team, thanks for watching. And tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.